Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. We have bellied up to the bar here on this Wednesday, the April 23rd. I always forget what day of the week it is, but we're back here at the bar doing what we do. And joining us, those of you that have listened to the show enough, I have a soft spot in my heart for the biggest drinking state that I have ever been to in my life, which is very appropriate for our next guest based on what he just told me. And he has a very important last name for me because the person who took me to Wisconsin the first time was also had the same last name. So joining us from parts unknown in Wisconsin, it's Mr. Gary Arndt. And Gary, my sound effects are all broken right now. So we're just going to pretend like everybody's clapping and cheering for you right now.
When it comes to Wisconsin and drinking, I just want to say, if you ever look at a map of the United States in terms of number of bars per capita, Wisconsin crushes every other state. Like, it's not even funny. And then if you zoom in on the state of Wisconsin, you'll notice a county north of Lake Winnebago. And then I live like right on the main street in that county. That's like, so this is ground zero for drinking in America. Like, if you did a bar crawl on that street, you'd probably die.
So, we're going to get into this, but the only time I've ever been to Wisconsin, I was in Madison, Grafton area with one of my closest friends, another Marine, whose name is Troy Arndt and is from that area.
Not related, at least not
directly.
There are some Arndts that moved here, or they migrated here, I should say, around, I want to say 1858.
Oh, wow.
And it could be that they were on some branch that I'm just not aware of. But I live closer up near Green Bay.
Okay.
Maybe about 30 minutes outside of Green Bay. So it's actually really crowded here right now because the Packers are hosting the NFL draft.
Is that where the draft's going at right now?
For a normal community, like for a normal like pro sports team community, nobody would notice. But for here, it's a big thing because it's sucked up all the hotel rooms. So all the communities from all around are booked, and because of the NFL draft.
I have paid zero, and I'm normally like, I enjoy the draft, but I paid 0.0 attention to the draft this year. Just one of those things that just hasn't been on my radar at all. But we can definitely get into all these different things because, again, folks, we're talking about world traveling with Gary. We're also going to talk about his podcast, Everything Everywhere Daily. We're going to get into that, talk about those things. So, but before we get too far, let's go ahead and get some house cleaning done. As always, over my right shoulder, it's the big board for Sticker and a Cause. You see my team right there, right here. I don't know if it's working well. The Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if it's backwards for you or not. But we always talk about the big board for Sticker and a Cause. If you've got something you're supporting, you have your own podcast, you have your own show, you have a band, I don't care what it is, and you want other people to know about it. If you reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Our website is theabovethebarpodcast.com. Our email address is theabovethebarpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out. Let me know what you got going on, what you got happening. We'll read all about you live here on the air. Let other people know about it. So make sure you reach out to us. Once again, that's Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, you name it, social media. We got it so that everybody can know what you got going on. But we also got to talk about the folks that pay the bills around here. And that's Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Cooksaki, and Schoharie, North America's largest custom window treatment company, focusing in on everything from blinds, shades, shutters, drapery. They do tint, you name it, they take care of it. Any type of custom window treatments. Here in the month of April, they're doing 25% off of all drapery. So if you're looking for those soft treatments, and I'll tell you, if you've never realized it, you always probably thought of drapery as grandma's house and big and heavy. But if you remember, drapery is the one thing that takes a place from being a house to a home. So make sure you're reaching out to them. And as always, with Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Cooksaki, and Schoharie, if you let them know that you're there to belly up to the bar, they're going to give you an extra 5% off of your entire order. That's right, folks. You could be getting 30% off of your order. So reach out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson, Cooksaki, and Schoharie, North America's largest custom window treatment company. All right, Gary, all the house cleaning's done. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's finally really nice here. It's in the 60s. So
I was about to say, what is nice? Is it like upstate New York where like it's 60 degrees and the windows have to get rolled down because it's like ungodly hot now?
no, 60 is great for me. I'm happy with that. Anything from like the mid 70s from like mid 50s.
You're digging that. Well, I mean, and we're going to get into this. So just jump right into it. So before you got into Everything Everywhere Daily for that podcast, you were a big photographer, award-winning blogger. You had a lot of travels. If I'm seeing the number right here, 140 different countries that you hit.
Yeah, it depends on how you define country. And that sounds like I'm being nitpicky, but it really isn't, because there's a lot of places you can visit. So, for example, if I said I was going to France, well, you're thinking of that country in Europe where they wear berets and eat baguettes.
Right.
But French Polynesia is just as much a part of France as Hawaii is a part of the United States.
Okay.
Or French Guiana in South America. Or, they have islands in the Caribbean, in the Indian Ocean. So technically, they are all the same country, but they're obviously different places.
Right.
So there's different lists that travelers use to like distinguish those things. And one of the more common ones is called the Traveler Century Club. And I think they've divided the world into 320, I think it's 326 places right now. And of that, I've been to 204.
Holy crap. So, I mean, I'm going to start with that for a minute. Like, how does that even become a thing? Were you in a job where you were traveling and just kind of went with it, or you decided, nope, this is what I'm going to do?
I sold my home in 2000. So let me back up a little sooner. I had an internet company that I started in the 90s. I sold it when I was 28. Started another company, but that got nailed by the .com bubble bursting. And in one spectacular day, everything just kind of fell apart. We had a deal with CNET for ad revenue, and we were doing video game websites, and we had a lot of, we were doing like 50 million ad impressions a month.
Wow.
And it just kind of all fell apart. When they encountered financial problems, it kind of came down to us. But anyways, then I went back to school for a few years, studied geology and geophysics, realized I wanted nothing to do with academia. And I hatched this idea of selling my home and traveling around the world. And in March of 2007, I sold my house and I set out to travel, and I thought I'd be gone a year or two. And I ended up spending 13 years doing it.
So I'm always curious with people who do that level of travel. And again, folks, if you want to know everything that Gary's got going on, he's got everything everywhere. Everything-everywhere.com is his website. You also can find him on Instagram. But when you're traveling at that level, 13 years of travel, was this like, I had traveled for 6 months and then I came back home to Wisconsin for a couple of weeks and then I went back out? Like, how do you make sure that, because that 13 years of being a nomad, unless you grew up that way, will burn you out, I would imagine, pretty quickly.
I think I spent about 2 years nonstop at first before coming back to the US. And then I had to come back because my dad was in the hospital and he passed away in 2010. And I'd be gone for many months at a time. When I was back in the US, I'd see my family, briefly, come back on certain holidays, but not every one. There are several Christmases I spent overseas. But yeah, it was kind of just moving around constantly. I wasn't necessarily, the longest I ever stayed in a place, I think, was about a month.
Where was that at?
I did it a couple times. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. It was more than a month. I spent a month in Bangkok. I spent a month in Hanoi. I spent a month in Melbourne. And I spent 3 months in Girona, Spain. That was probably it's an hour north of Barcelona.
Okay. I've been to Barcelona.
Yeah, everybody goes to Barcelona. And this is one of the things with travel, is that there are a few places everybody knows about. And so when they travel, they all want to go to those places because they know about it, and they just don't know what else there is. And what happens is you get a small number of places that everybody visits, often at the same time, like they're all there in the summer, and they become massively overcrowded. And it becomes a huge problem both for the people who live there, and it becomes a horrible experience for the people who visit. And more often than not, they have a cruise terminal and a large international airport. So people just arrive there and they kind of never leave. And I could go off about, like, so Barcelona's in Catalonia, and there's amazing things. Like, it has some of the best restaurants in the world. And that's not hyperbole. El Cellar de Can Roca in Girona was named the best restaurant in the world several times, like number one. El Bulli, which was a former number one restaurant, was also in that area. Then if you go to the other side of the country, like in Bilbao and San Sebastian, which is also on the Pyrenees, on the sea, but they're on the North Atlantic instead of the Mediterranean, you also see some of the best restaurants in the world. But a lot of people just they don't get out of Barcelona, and so they don't know what's there.
So when I was in Barcelona, I always tell folks it was the most Western feeling city that I'd ever been to in Europe. It had a very like East Coast, New York City, big monster city kind of a vibe, but with just way older buildings.
If you could kind of boil down the biggest differences between the United States and Europe, it comes down to age.
Yeah.
That is fundamentally the difference.
100%.
Why do they have quaint streets? Because they were all built before they had cars. If you go to the Netherlands, so I visited one of the polders. This is the reclaimed land. And this is I think the most recent one they did, which is, I think, in the 1970s. So about 50 years ago. It looks like the US. The streets are all at an angle and they're labeled the same way because they had cars. And when they build new stuff, it ends up looking like American cities because most of our stuff was built when we have cars. If you've ever been to Manhattan, there is a point on Manhattan Island where you can tell at the bottom it looks like a European layout of streets because it makes no sense. It was all organically designed. And then above that point, it's all the grid. And it's, the avenues and the streets, and it's perfectly laid out. Boston, same way. It's an old city.
Yes.
And there's that part of it that it's kind of European because it's old. And then you get further away, it's not laid out like that.
I know exactly what you mean. And those of you that are watching us live, Nate, I'm going to get to your question here in a second. If you got any questions for Gary, you want to know about his travels, or maybe where you should be going, someplace where he thinks is important, or you just have a story about somewhere you've been, drop it into the comment section. Please make sure you take a moment. Also, like, share, follow, all those cliche things. It really does make a difference for both of us. All right, Nate, normally I would wait for Nate's question towards the end because he asks this question every time, and I love it. But I think this, for a travel thing that we're talking about here, and then we're going to get into your how that ended up being this new podcast that you've been doing. Do you have, you're going back? Now I can tell you what mine is. I'll tell you there. I'm going to tell you mine first, Gary, because I know you said about small places people don't go. Have you ever been to Toulon, France?
No.
So Toulon is a port city, like a very blue collar port city on the Mediterranean in France. And there is where, to this day, I still had the greatest sandwich. I've talked about it on the show. It's called a smash sandwich. They take good French bread, whatever the protein is, chicken, meat, whatever, burger, whatever, put that on the bread with your lettuce and tomato, and then your French fries on there. We don't do freedom fries. I'm good with French fries. They put all that on there with that great French Dijon, and you got a sandwich that's about 4 inches thick. And then they put it inside of a flat iron press and press it down. And the next thing you know, you're like, this is an unbelievable sandwich.
So, favorite foods on the go. I'm going to have a couple different candidates. One would be the bacon shark in Trinidad. Bacon shark is 3 words, not 2. It's bake and shark, not bacon shark. And it's a fish sandwich made out of shark. And I
Interesting.
remember I was there, and Andrew Zimmern had been there before and said it was one of the best things he ever had. And I tried it, and I agree it was certainly the best fish sandwich I ever had. So I would put that. When I was in Tahiti, they have these food trucks called La Roulette that travel around the island, and then at night they all come to Papeete, which is the capital, and they set up like a little impromptu dining area, and they have their national dish called poisson cru, which is kind of a ceviche made out of tuna, tomato, cucumber, things like that. That's really, really good. A lot of the stuff I've had just walking around Bangkok. I actually went several days once just eating on the street there. And that can be anything from a noodle dish. They'll have lots of fried meats, which they did step in. I should say these are motorbikes with oftentimes a built-in wok or a fryer connected to the motorbike, so they can just drive their whole thing. They set up on the curb, and then they just cook. Kebab stands. You see these all over Europe because there's more Turkish immigrants to Europe than we have in the U.S. And I was just complaining about this, that we don't have any good Turkish places where I live. And then the next day, I realized there's a Turkish food truck. And so I've been visiting that at least once a week now because good kebab meals are, I think they're great. And that's really kind of the ultimate street food. They're just designed for like grabbing and going. And I will also say fries in the Netherlands or Belgium, they do a technique where they double fry their French fries. And they're kind of a thicker, almost a steak fry, really crispy. And I know it's weird for Americans, but having mayonnaise with your fries is,
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, once you get used to it. Same if you've ever had poutine from Canada. And I've often complained. I live in Wisconsin. We are cheese people. Why have we not at least introduced poutine to America through us? We have cheese. People eat cheese curds here all the time. We have not thought to put them on French fries, and I'm rather embarrassed.
Now, have you ever had poutine in Montreal?
Oh yeah,
smoked meat on poutine.
Schwartz's Deli in Montreal. That's kind of like the most famous deli where they have like their roast beef.
That's interesting. That's my Aunt Eileen. She says she likes to mix mustard and mayo on her fries. And James says ceviche is one of his favorites. I mean, and look, and Rick Simpson. Rick is all. I will tell you, Rick and you may have been separated at birth, Gary. Because as much as you talk about travel, Rick is probably my travel guru. If I really need to reach out, he worked for an airline for years that ended up. I don't remember if it went defunct or got bought out. He'll tell me here in a second. But one of the packages as they left was he still ended up with a lifetime plane pass where he can just. I think it's for two people. He can just walk up and be like, "I'd like to travel here."
Did you ever hear the story of when American did that? And I think it was in the 80s. They were desperate for cash, and so they sold these lifetime tickets for, I think, $250,000.
Holy crap.
And several people bought them, and they use them a lot. And it got to a point where this was like becoming a noticeable thing on their balance sheet. So they tried to buy these back or rescind them, and courts were like, no, you sold them a lifetime pass. And so a lot of these people would literally, if they were bored, go to Paris or something for the day.
Oh, that's awesome.
If you had unlimited, and I don't even know what something like that would cost today. And certainly more than $250,000. Probably several $1 million. But
what's the guy owns the basketball team? Mark Cuban.
Yeah.
Mark Cuban tells a story about that when he made his first real money during the dot-com bubble. The first thing he did was he bought a lifetime plane pass. That was the thing, to have one of those. And then his money really blew up and he became a billionaire. and he gave the pass away to one of his best friends. Like, here, man, you can have it. Enjoy. And look, and here's Rick. Rick's at first class pass. Look at you.
I would rather have a pass like that than a private jet.
Agreed. I can agree with that.
A private jet is a headache. Not like I know, but actually, I should say the Gulfstream, all their maintenance facilities are like a couple miles from where I live.
Oh,
So
okay.
there are like Saudi, like Gulfstream jets and stuff that are here all the time, undergoing maintenance. So I get to see this stuff at least, but it not only are they ridiculously expensive, but where you can fly and everything else and the maintenance and the cost would be so much. I mean, I suppose if you're really, really rich, who cares? But assuming you're a level of wealth and anonymity that you could walk on a plane and nobody would know who you are, I think it would be a better deal in a lot of ways.
But I'll tell you that first class, just being able to walk up and be like, I wouldn't mind just getting on the plane right now and going about my business. So here you are, and we're going to stay. We'll talk some more about this because you also, I think maybe I'm wrong. I know when I heard about you and started doing my research and I see, going from all this travel and doing all these things to, your current podcast, everything, everywhere, daily, kind of feeding into it. The first thing I thought of, and I'll probably get it wrong. Mark Twain had coined the phrase, you can't be he either said you can't be a racist or you can't hate people once you've traveled, like once you have that travel experience. How much did that kind of experience and really understanding cultures, understanding people, and really change your view that fed into creating everything everywhere daily?
It wasn't the culture stuff so much. I mean, one of the dirty secrets is the world is becoming homogenized.
What do you mean?
That it's becoming the same everywhere. And we have this like you go to Japan, and Japan is very different than the US. I'm not saying it isn't, but it used to be more different. That they're different. So you have like J-pop and K-pop, Japanese or Korean pop music. It's pop music. It's not, traditional music from that. No, they've adopted Western dress. They've adopted Western music. They've put their own twist on it, to be sure, but it's not going to sound like, oh, this is so different. You walk around in Tokyo and everybody's Japanese, but other than that, it could be a lot of places. And I've seen this in the United States. Where I grew up was heavily German and Polish initially. And I remember Sunday mornings, there would be a polka band on TV. Even at high school dances, they would play one polka song at least. And that was the one everybody would dance to. They'd play the beer barrel polka or something like that.
Roll out the barrel.
They don't do that anymore. You don't see that anymore. It's kind of just the same stuff everywhere. And a lot of this is the internet. And there's some good parts to it too. If you lived in the Midwest growing up, all the trends and the cool things started on the coast. And they would get to the middle of the country after a year or so, but it spread slowly. Now everything happens every place at the same time. It's all on TikTok. It can happen from anywhere. There's nothing special about any place anymore. Where I live, we have a variety of ethnic restaurants I can go to. I can go eat Indian, sushi, Chinese, Vietnamese, you name it, even the Turkish food truck. And those experiences are everywhere. Food has gotten better everywhere.
This is true.
The quality of food. You can go have really good fine dining in many places. I kid you not, in Regina, Saskatchewan. And there was a guy who was a top-end chef who moved back home. Regina.
Regina?
Regina. That's the name of the city. And yes, I know what you're thinking.
Please tell me it's near Uranus.
No, but the Saskatchewan's got a whole bunch of interesting. They have a moose jaw. But
James, no, you don't. You can get I can take you to a shawarma place in Troy. I'll fix you. He said
But
you got
but what
things
I'm
like
saying is like it's this notion of, oh, these are all these different cultures. Yeah, and some are more different than others. But there's a lot of homogenization. Go to Dubai. Dubai is just another Western city. It just happens to be in the Middle East, and you'll see some people walking around at the mall wearing Arab clothing.
now. I want to stay. Can we talk about Dubai for a second? Like
Sure.
Dubai is one of these places where out of obviously I know why it blew up. It became kind of the thing. Has it faded? Like they say it's the safest city in the world. You always see those videos like guys putting their wallets on their car and then going into a restaurant and all these different things. But is Dubai really even worth the trip? Or is it kind of like, yeah, you're in a desert oasis. Congratulations.
I think that some people love it and some people hate it. It is like going to any modern, I would say more American than really a Western city because it's brand new. And like I was saying, the way everything's laid out, they got all the malls and all the fast food restaurants and things like that. It's kind of sterile. There's no real feeling of anything. What I always tell people, if you go to Dubai, spend a day, get on the hop on, hop off bus, go see whatever the sites are. You'll see the Burj Khalifa and the Mall of Dubai and stuff like that, where they have the indoor ski slope.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And then go to Oman. Oman is far closer to real Arabia. Very safe, easy to get around. But that if you really want to travel and see some interesting stuff, I would recommend Oman or even other parts of the UAE. UAE is a very interesting country because it's not organized like any other country in the world. It's basically a collection of independent countries that are one country.
Oh, really?
Dubai is run completely separate from, say, Abu Dhabi. But for purposes of international relations and stuff, like they have one kind of common front at the UN and things like that, but they could easily splinter off into 7 countries. I don't think they will, but yeah, it's a federation of monarchies.
I had no idea. Well, I just recently learned that Saudi Arabia is not the name of Saudi Arabia. Like the country is Arabia. The Saudi is the family, and they're just so wealthy that they basically were like, we're going to stick our name in front of this. We're not really like the country is Arabia. Saudi.
Well, it's the majority of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
So
they just were like, we got a lot of money. Like I once heard, and I don't know how true it is, like supposedly, we say like this guy is the richest person in the world and that was the richest person in the world, that it's one of the sheiks and his value because of oil and other things is at such a level that it's just not talked about because it would shadow everybody else that we think is this wealthiest person at such a level. It like they say that he could be a trillionaire.
Well, it's an absolute monarchy, right? And the Saudi family, the House of Saud, owns, basically the country. So yeah, Mohammed bin Salman, who's technically the crown prince, but he really runs the country, bought Salvador Mundi. It was a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. It's the most expensive painting ever purchased for $450 million. And supposedly it's on his yacht.
And it's on a boat.
Yeah, God forbid it sank.
I'd be like, that sucks. Well, wasn't it one like we could get into those guys? So how does all this turn into, and again, folks, real quick, check out Gary's website, everything-everywhere.com. You can see what he's got going on. So how does all this travel get you to finally settle? And then we've got the podcast.
The most powerful force in the universe.
Women?
Desperation.
Oh.
So I can tell you what happened so my last international trip was Portugal, February of 2020. And I get home February 28th. I'm living in Minneapolis at the time. And March 1st, I get COVID. And this is still early enough on where there were no tests for COVID really, or what they had, there was like, oh, we got to keep them for first responders and hospital people. So I just felt miserable for like a week, and then I got over it. But then when I got better, everything started closing down, and it completely killed travel and tourism to a point where a lot of the companies that I was working with went to quite literally zero revenue. They had to shut all their operations down. Some hotels were able to stay alive, having, medical people come in or things like that. But if you're a tour company doing like ground tours, you had nothing. So everything I had going dried up. Everything. My income dropped by about 95%. And I had already become rather disillusioned with where travel media was going. It was becoming very reliant on Google. When I started, I just wrote my thoughts about the places I visited. And then with the rise of social media and everything, that, everybody was going through the social media sites, and then it became dependent on the algorithm, and it just ruined everything. And everybody just started writing these articles for Google that were just like 15 things to do in Las Vegas, 15 things to do in whatever. And I didn't like it. And when this happened, I realized this was an opportunity for me to make a big change. And one of the things I also noticed about travel is that nobody cares about travel unless you're about to go on a trip.
I will agree.
And I wanted something because I had friends with very popular science websites, fashion, food, and they all had way more people visiting because there were things that people were interested in all the time. And so I was like, well, how can I take this experience I have? I got a bunch of academic degrees and a lot of experience traveling. How could I, what can I do? And so I had an idea of a podcast in 2018 that, the name of my website is Everything Everywhere, which is the most generic thing ever. And I should say I had it a decade before the movie ever came out. So the original idea was I was going to do these lengthy shows of like 2 hours and do it every other week. And every episode would be different. So the first episode of the show was going to be explaining why the Mona Lisa is the most famous painting in the world. It's not a picture of anything religious. It's not a picture of someone who was a king or a queen. Why is this picture so famous? And it turns out there's actually a really good explanation for it. It was stolen in the early 20th century. When it became stolen, it was in the news all over the world, and that's how it became famous. But I dropped the idea. I didn't think it was make a good business decision. And then when the pandemic hit, I revisited the idea, but I had a friend that did a daily podcast, and he said it was business-wise a really good move. And I kind of ran the numbers, and I was like, this makes more sense. So instead of taking a howitzer to a topic, I decided to take the shotgun approach and do shorter episodes more frequently. And tomorrow's episode is number 1753.
Brother, that's not a bad number. That's not a bad number. And I notice, and look, folks, if you actually go on to Instagram and you look up Everything Everywhere, I did notice 40 million downloads. Brother, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's probably closer to almost 50 at this point, but it gets about 1.5 million downloads a month.
And is that from is that just Instagram, or not Instagram, but is that like YouTube? Like, where are those downloads coming from?
There is no YouTube.
There's no YouTube.
Well, technically I do upload the audio to YouTube, but nobody listens on YouTube. It's just audio. Apple and Spotify is most of it.
Dude, that's impressive. Like, you're doing no YouTube at all?
No.
That's as a podcaster who's been doing this for 5 years, that's super impressive. How much of your audience, and I'm going to stay with the podcast side for a minute. How much of your audience came over from your days of traveling and photography and doing that stuff? Because you got beautiful pictures on your
almost
Instagram
none.
page. No, really?
No, if you look at my Instagram, it's like, 178,000 followers or something. I think I had maybe
176, yeah.
I had about 200 people listening when I launched the show. Every episode.
So what do you think and we'll just stay with this for a second. What do you think really kind of was the catalyst for people to start going, hey, we want to listen to this. We want to hear about this. We want to know what he's got going on.
Persistence and word of mouth. I was making something that I was interested. I made the show I wanted to listen to. And I figured if I wanted to listen to it, there'd be other people that would. And I just kept doing it. And it just kind of kept growing. And it gets the attention of more and more people over time. I get, messages from so many people who say, "Oh, I'm become so annoying at work because I share this podcast with everybody all the time." And one of the appealing parts of it, I think, is that so much of what we consume in our life on YouTube or social media is all run by an algorithm.
Very true.
They determine what you see. There's no serendipity, right? Or I should say, there's very little of it. And my show is audio podcasting has no algorithm. So, for example, I know some people with popular YouTube channels, and they would make a video, and then they would have one that kind of blew up. And then okay, well, I'll do that again. And the next thing you know, that's all they're doing because that's what the algorithm wants. And I get people that say, "Well, you should look at your stats and see what the most popular episodes are and do more of that." And there is none. They're all the same because it's not an algorithm. People just subscribe to the show in their podcast player and they listen to whatever comes up. And I get people all the time that are like, "I didn't know anything about this. I'd never heard of this." And that's the way, you coming across things by chance is kind of how you learn about stuff. And I'm sure you've had this happen. You watch one video on YouTube about woodworking, and the next thing you know, they're just tons of woodworking videos, and that's all they show you. And it's like, yeah, I was just interested in that one thing. I don't want to, that's not my life now.
That's not my rabbit hole. And look, folks, if you have questions for Gary, please drop them in the comments. Let him know what you got going on. Rick says he's leaving for Portugal on May 4th. We leave on Friday, brother. I'm looking forward to it. And then James has actually said he's going to, where was it? Dublin and Vienna for 2 weeks. He's traveling there. So I want to stay, because as a podcast, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm super impressed by 50 million downloads. Like, to me, I just hit 50,000 and I'm like, oh, I'm finally hitting a stride of, regular downloads. Things are starting to come. For somebody in that position that, and listen, I'm asking for myself, that hit that rut where you're like, why isn't this picking up? What are some of the things that you would suggest?
Well, for starters, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I made a conscious decision to not have an interview podcast.
Okay.
Because so many podcasts are interview shows. And to make yourself stand out with interview shows, it's really all about the guest. Because I'm sure you've had some people on who are better guests than others. Let's put it that way.
Yes, absolutely. That's a phenomenal way to put that.
And
yes.
It has nothing to do with you or your talent or ability. It's the guest. And I don't have that problem. And so, but the flip side of that is I write a 2,000 word term paper every day.
Oh, you're better.
I've gotten very good at it now. I can turn it around in about 3 to 4 hours. But so I'm writing a script every day, but I think having something like that, that's a little different, was very helpful. That's one of the big things. And yeah, it's, I think if you're doing an interview show, it's real. I've thought about launching a second show that would be an interview show, that would kind of be under the umbrella. And I'd need to figure it out. I'd need to be able to bring on some real heavy hitters for guests.
Yes.
I think, to make it work.
See, people are always surprised. Like, I mean, you were scheduled months out. My podcast right now, I'm booking late August, early September. But I'm probably the opposite of a lot of people. I want to talk to everybody. I want to know everybody's story.
And the other thing is to make more shows. A lot of people have a weekly show, and I tell them, well, come out with 2 a week. And your second show doesn't have to be the same as what you've been doing. And that frightens a lot of podcasters, because if they have an interview show, the idea of doing a solo show is kind of difficult. And then when they do it, and almost every time I've heard of this, they get the same result. It gets more downloads than the interview shows.
Interesting.
Because people are invested in the host. That's what they're listening to.
You know what? I would. So it's funny. I've considered this, doing a very easy, like 5-10 minute, like shooter podcast where it was like about something that I was interested in and
Yeah.
just discussing that. You do have a couple of questions here. David Day, he wants to know, without revealing actual numbers, how long did it take your podcast income to surpass your travel blog income? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, it was about 18 months to 2 years.
That's
Um,
that's
I mean,
dedication.
when I went down this path, a lot of people, you've probably heard the stat, most people never make it to episode 7 of a podcast. They give up.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I want to have a podcast, and they do it, and something comes up, and it gets put in the side, and then they never do it. I like I said, 95% of my income was gone. I had to make this work. And so when I started, I didn't envision myself being successful. I envisioned myself sitting in a room for 2 years working on this show. And that's pretty much what I did. But I was willing to put in the work because I knew it would eventually pay off. And, I only had gotten really good comments about the show. So it was just a matter of sticking with it and letting nature take its course.
I mean, dude, that's awesome. And David also wants to know, since you're good at condensing complex topics, can you give a 3-minute masterclass on creating a successful daily podcast? It's an interesting question. Great question.
There are
David.
different types of daily podcasts. I know people that they do like 5 minutes, and it's just kind of them talking about a subject for 5 minutes, and it's just kind of randomly off the top of their head. And what they do is they sit down on like Monday and they record all the podcasts for the week. That is not what I do. My shows are much more in depth and involve a lot more research. It's not Gary's thoughts. It's the history of Didius Julianus, who bought the Roman imperial seat and then was later executed, or stuff like that. My episode yesterday was on how they choose a pope and what happens in the period between one dying and the next one being elected, which is rather involved, and there's a lot of history in it. So, like I said, it takes me about 3 to 4 hours. And today, and when I started, I've had episodes that took me as long as 8 hours to make. And I do everything myself. No one helps me at the show. All the artwork, all the recording, all the editing is me. And I have it down to a science now where literally the order I press buttons and GarageBand and everything else, it's just muscle memory at this point. But the biggest thing for a daily podcast is you have to stick with it.
Yes, I will agree with that,
because it's a job. Now you can, if you're doing something where you can batch it in one day, and I know if you've ever heard of Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas, very popular daily show. He does these 20-minute interviews, and he records everything in one day of the week. Right. Like I said, that's not what I do, but what I do to take a day off is I just run a rerun. And I have enough episodes now where I can do that and be confident that most people probably haven't heard it. And even if they did, it was at least a year or two ago, so they're probably not going to mind.
It's funny you mentioned that. So we're on vacation next week, or starting Friday, and I was like, I'm not running a show this Wednesday. Like, I didn't plan anything. And I was like, maybe I could pull an old episode and just throw it forward and see what people think about it, and just stick it out there and go from there. It's interesting. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, and depending on how many episodes you have in your back catalog, people might not even notice.
270 and change.
Yeah.
We've been doing this. And real quick here, folks, we're getting close to our New Scotland Spirits last call. So if you're looking for a spirit that's as bold and rich as New York history, New Scotland Spirits is crafting exceptional, locally sourced whiskey that tells a story with every sip. From grain to glass, we honor tradition while pushing the boundaries of flavor. Whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or just getting started, there's a bottle waiting for you. Raise your glass to true craftsmanship. Find New Scotland Spirits near you or visit newscotlandspirits.com to learn more. New Scotland Spirits, where history and flavor meet. So let me throw Rick's question out here, because I don't even know how to pronounce this. Maybe you do. Have you been to The
answer is no.
Yeah, like I don't even know how to pronounce that. Can you pronounce that?
Monum Visa?
Montavasia. All right, Rick, you're gonna have to like sound it out, put it like little like tick marks so I know how to pronounce each thing here. So with the with your podcast and everything, where are we trying to take this? Are we staying with the daily? Because you also were telling me you have a second show that you do that's a little more local to where you are, which I thought was absolutely fascinating that you're doing it with a NASA scientist. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, so it's not really my show. I'm kind of the host, but I'm not like I'm more the color commentator rather than the expert. Um, and it's called Respecting the Beer. And we have a couple different co-hosts that I host it with. There's a local brewery run by a fantastic brewer named Bobby Fleshman. He's a former astrophysicist at NASA, and his wife is a professor of chemistry at the local college. So they started this brewery, and he just does a masterful job brewing. Like he can sit and talk for hours on foam. And he, like, the biggest beer program in the world is at University of California, Davis. And he attended there, and he got to know a lot of the big names in brewing. And so we've had them as guests. We have a local historian who loves beer that we've had come on and talk about the history of beer and brewing. We've talked about the economics of running a brewery and why it's hard. And so it's not just a promotional thing for their beer, and they do a great job. They had the International Beer Festival this year. They won the gold medal for best lager, which is like the most insanely competitive category there is.
Is it really?
Yeah, I mean, go to a liquor store and look at their beer. It's mostly light lagers. That's everything that's consumed pretty much in the United States. And they won. Actually, it was a Spanish beer that won their other one for international lager, Estrella Dram. So if you're ever, I'm sure they probably serve it in Portugal too. It's kind of everywhere. It's their Budweiser. But I'm actually going there right after I'm done talking to you. And they have a menu on the wall of about 24 different beers, all brewed internally, Belgian sours, IPAs,
sours,
you name it. Barrel-aged beers, speaking of whiskey, which I had never really had before. And I thought it was BS. And then he poured me one and I tasted it. And if I had known better, I would have thought that he put a shot of bourbon in it or something. But the aging of some of these beers and with barrel aged beers are fantastic. Stouts, English ales is one of their specialties, though a lot of people, they really are not familiar with them. They have cask beers. They just got a special faucet from the Czech Republic called a Luker faucet for pouring pilsners, and they can do these special pours. So this is advanced beer. Cool. And we've had listeners. It's not nearly as big as my other show, but we've had beer fans drive hours out of their way. We just had a guy from Minnesota that drove all the way here. That's like a 4-hour drive. We had one guy who was driving from New York to California and made a 3-hour detour from Chicago to come up here to come to the brewery just to experience it. And it's really developing, I think, reputation for the brewery. There are certain breweries like Russian River in California that have developed these reputations, and we've done blind taste testings of their top IPA. So like Blind Pig or Pliny the Elder, which are kind of considered the two biggest West Coast or best West Coast IPAs in the country, which they don't sell out of the state of California. So people literally had to fly the bottles in. And we did it with their top West Coast IPA, which is called 547. And like 547 wins 90% of the time but granted, it's not that fair. One's coming out of a tap, others are coming out of a bottle. And it's also homers who are,
but I got to ask this question. Do they have a Hefeweizen?
Yes.
That's super important to me. That is my favorite style of beer is Hefeweizen.
And Eisbach, which they don't make a lot of, but Eisbachs are fantastic. It's literally it's when the barrel freezes, and when it freezes, it's undergoing distillation. Technically, it's illegal because you need a distiller's license to freeze beer because it's distillation. But You can find Icebox, and there's kind of an Icebox cult out there of people who love them. But, I've been exposed to so many different types of beers, like Belgian sours that I really like. Or they'll
I
have
can't do
summer
that.
beers coming out like a Gosa. And they just had one, what was it? It was a French farmhouse beer. They had a very limited run of it last week. And some of their barrel aged beers may have an alcohol content of like up to 12%. And this was like 3%, which is more of like almost a table beer like they used to have in the Middle Ages, where you were drinking beer probably even lower than that.
It's safer than water.
Yeah.
And real quick, so Gary wants to know, you've talked about temporary relocating to New Zealand. Is that still a plan? David is very into your show. I'm assuming he knows your show very well.
Yeah, I was gonna go to New Zealand or Australia this summer, or I should say this winter, their summer, and I just kind of never did it. So I still think I'm going to do something like that. I'm not going to be able to travel like I used to, but I'm going to. I would like to do that because I can do the show from anywhere. I just line up a couple reruns for 3 days in a row or something, and then I just start doing the same thing. And in fact, if I cross the international date line, it would probably even make it easier because I can do it in a day in advance.
There you go.
But yeah, I would definitely like to do that again. And I want to get my revenge on Australia because when I was there, the Australian dollar is basically a parity with the US dollar. And the US dollar is so much in a better place right now. It was like 62 cents I last checked. Probably has gone down a little bit since then, but Australia has very expensive real estate. So I was looking at renting an apartment or something for a month, and it's still pretty pricey. But when you price it in American dollars, it isn't nearly as bad as what's listed in Australian dollars. So it's kind of like a discount. In Auckland, it was even more pronounced, which is why I was thinking Auckland might even be a better deal than going to Australia.
Australia's on my list of places. I want to do Southeast Asia. You were talking about like Andrew Zimmerman, who I grew up watching Andrew Zimmerman, and I'm still a big. I would always say, and I don't know if you can see it. There's Anthony right there.
I met him like a couple months before he died.
Yeah, he is my spirit animal. I think, when you were talking about the bull, I watched his episode because he closed the bull in Spain. That was one of his big episodes. And I just remember watching that cooking and going, this is insanity.
What a lot of people don't. So I met him. We were staying at the same hotel in Lafayette, Louisiana. One of his last episodes was on Mardi Gras. And we were flown in by the tourism board there. And I was staying there. And I'd see him and his crew every morning. He'd have a cigarette or something. He looked hungover. I don't think he was drinking. But I always tell people he was first and foremost a food guy. Travel was the lens through which he looked at food. And I've always been more of like a history guy. And travel was the lens I looked through it. And a lot of the things that are pure travel, I have no interest in. A lot of people talk about credit cards, frequent flyer programs, travel tips, which I don't care about any of that. I don't care about packing your bag. Just put crap in a bag and go.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter. And a lot of I have a frequent flyer credit card, and I'm going to probably end up burning all my points on a new laptop rather than a ticket because I don't
listen. I understand what you're saying. I told you we're going to Lisbon on Friday. I bought new Apple headphones for me, my wife, and my sons because I was like, this is makes more sense to me than worrying about the ticket. My wife will be the one that spends the next day and a half worrying about our bags being packed. I would go in my drawers and go,
anything that you forget, you can buy there.
They have stores.
Yes. And a lot of people don't realize that. If there's one food suggestion I'll make a couple of suggestions if you're going to Lisbon.
Yes, please.
There's a wine I discovered there. I've been able to find it back in the US since. Vino Verde. It's which just means green wine.
All right.
It's actually a white wine, but it has a slightly green tint to it. I think it's fantastic. It's a Portuguese wine. And definitely take a day trip to Sintra. Sintra is just outside of Lisbon. Easily take a cab ride. It's not that far. You don't have to stay overnight. And Sintra has all kinds of really cool stuff. And if you go to my website, I have 50,000 pictures, all divided up by geography. You can see what's at Sintra. They have some very cool things, including an inverted tower.
A what?
Instead of a tower building that goes up, it goes down. So it's like a giant well, except there's stairs going around it. And it was used for Masonic rituals, I think. Well, there you go. Then you definitely got to go, because and there's a really cool palace that's there too. Then there's the former royal palaces in Lisbon, and it's a lot of Americans are actually starting to move to Portugal.
I can't get over how many people, when I was like, yeah, we're going to go to Lisbon. Rick just saying he's going in May. My accountant, I was like, yeah, we're going. He's like, yeah, we're going in June. I'm like, what did I miss? And we're getting ready to close the show. Rick said you pronounce it as Monavesia in southern peninsula of Greece. Monavesia. And he says few Americans go there. He learned about it from an Austrian friend. Hooked him up with that one. So there's a spot for you. You've never been. I've only been to Corfu, Rick. Corfu was
I've
where
been to Corfu.
Corfu
I was there like the last weekend, the tourist season, where they're trying to, all the restaurants and stuff were going to be closing. And so everything
giving shit away
because nobody was there.
And then what do you mean by train? Like, is it like possible to go by train? I guess that's what I'm thinking here.
To Sintra?
I guess, yeah, that's what
I'm almost certain you can.
I would take a European train. I was a conductor on a train. Rick was a conductor with me. We worked together. The only thing I would say I would be curious with European trains. I heard that like if your ticket says you're in car 2, seat 7B, you better be in car 2, seat 7B, where American trains are more like get on and sit down and shut up. European, I hear, is very different. What's your experience been like with that?
You see that all over the world, even going to movie theaters. You're starting to see it more now in the U.S., but it used to be in the U.S. You just got a ticket and you just walked in and sat wherever you wanted in the movie theater. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of places, like, you have to sit in, you're buying a particular seat, seat 2 in row D. And yeah, that's the way their systems work.
Yeah.
Highly recommend Sintra. And if you're just planning on staying in Lisbon, yeah. When I was there, I rented a car and just drove around. I went up to about the middle of Portugal, up to Coimbra, where the university is, and there's a bunch of other World Heritage sites that I visited.
Well, I will definitely check it out, because we're going to be meeting with another couple. So it's a big trip. There's a big group of us going over there, and I will meet with one of the other couples, and I will tell them, hey, we're going to try to go to Sintra. And I just looked it up. See also Cape Roca, National Palace of Pena is popping up. What is so special about Sintra? It says in 19th century, Sintra became the first center of European romantic architecture.
Yeah, the architecture in Sintra is amazing.
And see, I love architecture. Dude, that's awesome. So, look, folks, we're getting ready to close things up. Make sure you're taking the time. Go find Gary's Instagram page, which is, as I almost forgot, Everything Everywhere. If you look that up on Instagram, you can start following him. Look, Gary, you've got 141 followers on Instagram. I'd like to be 142. I'd like to be one. Can you make me 142? I'm going to ask it right now on the air.
What's your Instagram?
The Above the Bar Podcast.
I to be honest, I never use Instagram that much anymore.
I'm just being a douche. I had a moment. And Rick said he's now following you. David, thank you for the recommendation. I'm actually going to look up what.
I'd rather people listen to the podcast. I don't care about Instagram.
Well, go make sure you follow that also. He's on all the platforms. You can find him everywhere. And David, I appreciate that suggestion. I'm going to look up what Pastel de Balam. Am I pronouncing that? Balam? Balemi? I don't know. Balam. Pasta de Belém is a famous Portuguese egg custard tart. My family will love that.
Oh, I've had that in Macau.
Okay.
Which was a Portuguese city, just in Chinese. That's kind of their big dish, is the egg custard.
And I've been to a Portuguese bakery. If you go to Cape Cod in Massachusetts and you
there's
go
lots of Portuguese in Massachusetts.
and you go up to P-Town, Provincetown, they have a place called the Portuguese Bakery, which is and when my wife and I honeymooned, we stayed at a place. It was a not a bed and breakfast, but I guess it was a bed and breakfast, but it was called the Portuguese Captain. That was a very famous for Portuguese sailors in that area. So something, brother, you have been, Gary, like this, you're one of those guests. Remember you talked about like some guests are better than others. I feel like you're one of those guests that I could sit here and talk to for about the next another hour about places you've been and places I should be going and places I've been that maybe you haven't been. Like when I mentioned Corfu, or not Corfu, but Toulon, all those different places. Za Maddalena. There's another one for you if you ever get a chance. Za Maddalena, little tiny island off the coast of Italy. Absolutely the coolest place to go to. But we could definitely spend a lot of time. Again, folks, like I mentioned, we're not doing a live show next week. Based on the suggestions by good Mr. Gary, maybe I'll throw up an older episode. But we will be back on the 7th. We have Devin Noir coming on. Devin is a Manhattan-raised artist who came into tattooing through a mix of curiosity, intuition, and one very well-timed Google search. 7 years later, he created a distinct style of black work, sigil craft, and ancient symbolism, and he's helping bring back to an industry that's often misunderstood. So I always love tattoo artists. So my daughter's one. So we're going to be talking about tattoos on that day, getting an idea of what's out there, what you should know about, maybe even what you should avoid. Like
I got my only tattoo on the island of Rarotonga in the Cook Islands.
What was it, like old school, like
no
with the stick, like legit?
But I did actually video the whole thing, and that is on YouTube. And I still occasionally meet people from the Cook Islands at various tourist events, and I show them my tattoo, and they're like, "Who did it?" And I go, "Stormy," and they're like, "Oh, she's my cousin," because everyone's related. So
it's one of those kind of places. Yeah. I love it. Well, look, folks, make sure you take your time. Give Gary a like, share, follow. Go find all of his podcast stuff on Apple, Spotify, everything. He sounds like he's just like me. I'd write it on the back of your grandmother's transistor radio if I could get it there. So make sure you give him all that. So now, Gary, don't log off on me right after the show, but we have a very important part. I know you took the time. You've binged all 270 some episodes of this, and you know what's coming next. But the guest always gets the final word. So what's our final word tonight there, good sir?
If you want some general travel advice, here's what I always tell people. The ability to adapt is more important than the ability to plan. And a lot of people will make highly detailed plans before they go on a trip. And to paraphrase Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan before they get hit in the face. And something's going to happen. Your plans are going to go out of whack. So you always need to be flexible. And whenever you go somewhere, realize you're never going to be able to see everything. And always plan on returning again someday to see the rest of it. Because otherwise you're just going to leave unfulfilled and angry.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.